Iraq, the historical cradle of civilization, stands at a unique crossroads in the 21st century. Nestled between the giants of the Middle East, its potential to reclaim its status as a global power is rooted in its immense natural resources, strategic geography, and a resilient young population. Throughout history, from the Abbasid Caliphate to the mid-20th century, Iraq has served as the intellectual and economic heartbeat of the Arab world. However, decades of conflict, sanctions, and internal strife have obscured this potential. The question of Iraq's resurgence is not merely a regional matter. It is a scenario that would fundamentally alter the global energy market, the balance of power in Eurasia, and the security architecture of the entire world. Today we will talk about what if Iraq becomes a global power again. So, before we start, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe to my channel. What if Iraq becomes a global power again? The most immediate impact of a resurgent Iraq would be felt in the global energy sector. Iraq sits on the world's fifth largest proven oil reserves and massive untapped natural gas deposits. If Iraq achieved the political stability necessary to modernize its infrastructure and attract consistent foreign investment, it could realistically rival Saudi Arabia in production capacity. A global power Iraq would no longer be a passive member of OPEC, but a dominant price setter. By flooding the market or tightening supply, a stabilized Iraq could dictate the pace of the global energy transition. Furthermore, its ability to export gas to Europe through pipelines via Turkey would provide a critical alternative to Russian or Caspian energy, making Baghdad a central pillar of European energy security. Economically, Iraq's return to power would center on the Development Road project, a massive infrastructure initiative designed to link the Grand Fa port in the south to the Turkish border in the north. If successful, this would create a land bridge between Asia and Europe that rivals the Suez Canal in importance. As a global power, Iraq would become the ultimate middleman of trade, capturing a significant portion of the goods flowing from China and India toward Western markets. This would transform Iraq from a rentier state dependent on oil into a diversified logistics hub, sparking an industrial revolution within its borders and creating a wealthy middle class that could drive regional consumption. The geopolitical balance of Middle East would undergo a seismic shift if Baghdad regained its strength. For the past 2 decades, Iraq has often been viewed as a playground for the rivalry between Iran and Saudi Arabia. A powerful, sovereign Iraq would act as a buffer state or a mediator rather than a proxy. By asserting its own independent foreign policy, Iraq could effectively neutralize the Cold War between Tehran and Riyadh, forcing both neighbors to respect its borders. This would end the land bridge concept currently utilized by regional actors and replace it with a stability anchor. A strong Iraq would essentially re-establish the tripolar Middle East, where Cairo, Riyadh, and Baghdad once balanced each other, preventing any single nation from achieving regional hegemony. In terms of military and security influence, a resurgent Iraq would possess one of the most battle-hardened and technologically advanced militaries in the world. Having spent decades fighting unconventional insurgencies and high-intensity conflicts, the Iraqi security forces, if properly unified under a stable government, would become the primary guarantor of security in the Persian Gulf. This would likely lead to a reduction in the permanent footprint of Western military forces in the region, as Iraq would be capable of securing its own maritime borders and suppressing extremist movements like ISIS without external help. A global power Iraq would project naval power into the North Arabian Sea, ensuring that the oil lanes of the Gulf remain open under local rather than foreign supervision. The cultural and intellectual rebirth of Iraq would have profound implications for the Islamic world. Baghdad was once the house of wisdom, the center of global learning. If Iraq becomes a power again, its universities and religious centers in Najaf and Karbala would regain their status as the preeminent sites for Islamic scholarship, potentially overshadowing the more conservative ideologies exported by other regional players. This Baghdad Renaissance could lead to a more pluralistic and modernized interpretation of governance in the Arab world, blending traditional values with democratic participation. The return of the Iraqi diaspora, millions of highly educated doctors, engineers, and scientists would provide the human capital necessary to lead a technological revolution in the heart of the Middle East. From a resource management perspective, a powerful Iraq would hold the keys to the water wars of the future by controlling the downstream flow of the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. Iraq is currently at the mercy of dam projects in Turkey and Iran. However, a global power Iraq would have the diplomatic and economic leverage to negotiate favorable water-sharing treaties. It could invest in massive desalination and advanced irrigation technology, turning the Fertile Crescent back into the breadbasket of the Middle East. This agricultural independence would provide food security for the region, reducing its dependence on global grain markets and making Iraq a critical player in the fight against climate change and desertification. Furthermore, Iraq's internal political model would serve as a blueprint for other multi-ethnic and multi-religious states. If Iraq manages to successfully navigate its consociationalist system, balancing the interests of Shias, Sunnis, and Kurds to achieve global power status, it would prove that diversity can be a source of strength rather than a cause for civil war. This Iraqi model would challenge the authoritarian standards of its neighbors, potentially sparking a new wave of reform across the region. A powerful Iraq would likely be a more democratic Iraq, providing a rare example of a functional, resource-rich democracy in a part of the world dominated by monarchies and autocracies. The global financial impact would be equally significant, as Iraq accumulates massive sovereign wealth from its trade and energy dominance. It would become a primary investor in global markets. Much like the sovereign wealth funds of Norway or the UAE, an Iraqi investment authority could buy up significant stakes in Western technology firms, real estate, and green energy projects. Baghdad would once again become a financial capital, with the Iraqi dinar potentially becoming a reserve currency for regional trade. This financial integration would make the world more invested in Iraq's peace and stability, creating a virtuous cycle of growth and security. However, the path to becoming a global power is fraught with existential challenges. For this scenario to manifest, Iraq must permanently defeat the ghost of sectarianism and the cancer of systemic corruption. A powerful Iraq requires a government that prioritizes national identity over subnational loyalties. If it fails to do this, the very resources that could make it a global power, oil and water, will continue to be the prizes that fuel internal conflict. The what-if of Iraq's power is essentially erased between its immense potential and the historical baggage of its recent past. If the potential wins, the 21st century could very well be remembered as the Iraqi century in the Middle East. Finally, the international reaction to a rising Iraq would be complex. While global markets would welcome the stability and energy, other regional powers might view a strong Baghdad with suspicion. The United States, China, and Russia would all compete for Iraq's favor, as the nation would hold the swing vote in many international disputes. Iraq would likely adopt a policy of active neutrality, refusing to join any single bloc while extracting benefits from all. This would make Baghdad the diplomatic capital of the world, where East meets West to settle the most pressing issues of the day. In this vision, the Gate of the East would not just be a geographical description, but a geopolitical reality. If you like this video and would like to see more like it, please give it a thumbs up, leave a comment, and click the button to subscribe.